best way to open up a chapter is to do this. What's up, guys? My name is Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer. I'm the author of Bad Parts, and welcome to my writing channel. Today we're going to talk about opening up your chapter, specifically coming up with the right lines or paragraphs or moments that set your story in motion time and again until you get to the very end. Now, when it comes to writing chapters, one of the most important things to remember is that a chapter should always open by giving your audience something to latch onto and something to get excited about. If you hit on those two things, you will at least push your audience forward enough to get them into the actual chapter. Now, there are 7 techniques I want to share with you today, and the first one is probably the most important one as far as opening up your chapters. It's something we talk about a lot on this show, and it's the idea of raising questions. And anytime you raise questions in your reader's mind, you make them more curious about the story, you make them want to read more. So that's naturally something that's effective and something that you should be beginning your chapters with. For instance, if you start a chapter by saying something like blood dripped from the ceiling, that's going to put questions in your reader's head. They're going to be wondering, well, how did the blood get there? Will there be more of it? Who put it there? And so on and so on. Anytime you can open up a chapter by making your readers curious, do it. The number 2 technique for opening up a chapter is grounding your readers in a vivid moment. And of course, the way to ground readers in any moment is to give sensory details. Sight, hearing, taste, smell, feeling. All those things are critical to just bringing your readers into the characters and into the story. So if you can start a chapter by mentioning how the wind is brushing across the character's skin, or how the sky is turning the color of an ugly bruise, or how your character feels when they wipe their ass with some poison ivy, all those types of vivid details can just draw your readers right in. My number 3 tip is to begin a chapter in media res. And in media res is just a fancy way of saying in the middle of things, whether it be in the middle of a conversation or in the middle of some action. Now, you can do this in a lot of different ways, but the important thing is you want to throw your readers off balance every now and then. Instead of just spoon-feeding them information in every single chapter, sometimes it helps if you could just put them smack dab in the middle of something and force them to wonder what happened before this moment and how is this moment going to play out. For instance, if you open up a chapter with a character who says something like, "If you ever say that to me again, I will kill you," your readers will be curious about what was said before this chapter started, and they will also wonder how this conversation is going to go down. And this is just a great technique because it keeps your readers on edge. It keeps them thinking and working. They have to engage with the story more. My number 4 tip is the opposite of in media res, and it's the idea of summarizing recent events. And I'm sure you've all read stories where one chapter ends and then the next one picks up a few hours later, or a few days later, or even a few years later. And that span of time between the 2 chapters, we don't really get to experience the action, but oftentimes in that follow-up chapter, it will open up by giving us a quick recap of the events that happened. For instance, you might open up a chapter by saying, for the next 5 years, they changed diapers and bought baby formula and wondered why they had to have so many kids. I mean, that's just a rough example of summarizing events, just giving a quick overview of what happened to get your readers up to speed. Now, if you are going to use this technique, be careful because it's not the most exciting way to open up a chapter. You're much better off keeping us in the present moment rather than just summarizing events that happened. You don't want to cheat your readers out of too much of the action. My number 5 tip is answering the previous chapter's cliffhanger. And if you know anything about ending chapters, you know that one of the most effective ways of doing it is to use a cliffhanger, to cut off the action before your readers get their questions answered. And typically, it's great to start off a chapter by answering that question. Now, for instance, if chapter 1 ends on a cliffhanger, you can potentially start chapter 2 by answering that cliffhanger. But you can also stretch things out a little bit, keep your readers in suspense by going to another plot line, and then coming back to your answer in chapter 3 or chapter 4 or so on. The important thing to remember is you want to use your cliffhangers strategically. You want them to end a chapter and make your readers want more, and then you want to deliver on that question at a later time. My number 6 tip is probably the most sophisticated one on today's list, and it's one that you might find confusing at first, but trust me, stick with it. I have a great example that'll illustrate what I mean. And what my number 6 tip is, it's the idea of beginning your chapter by mirroring the end of your previous chapter. What I mean by this is once you end a chapter, You can take an element from the end of that chapter, whether it be a character reaction, an image, a moment, an event, a line of dialogue, whatever. You can take an element from the end of one chapter and use it again at the beginning of the next chapter. But what you need to do is you need to present it in a new way. Now that might sound confusing, so here's a great example of what I mean. It's from the second Jurassic Park movie, The Lost World. Now, if you remember, the opening scene from The Lost World is with the rich parents on the beach. They're on the island, and their daughter, she runs off with some bread. She starts feeding the dinosaurs, not knowing that these dinosaurs are actually meat eaters and they want to kill her. And what happens is the parents get wind of her running off. They start chasing after her to help her. And then at the end, we get this moment. Now this scene ends with the mother opening her mouth to scream. And this is the element you want to pay attention to, because in the very next scene we see this element again. And I'm going to show it to you right now. So the element I'm talking about is obviously the open mouth. In the first scene, a woman opens her mouth to scream because her daughter is being killed by dinosaurs. In the second scene, we get a veteran from the first movie, Ian Malcolm, who's the main character in this movie. He opens his mouth to yawn because he's been there, he's done that. And this technique, this mirroring, is a great way to show how your ideas can contrast depending on which character is looking at them. For instance, in your story, you might have your main character watch a sunset and feel impending doom because something bad is supposed to happen tonight. But you might cut to the next scene. At the very beginning, you have a villain who is looking at that same sunset and feeling pretty good about the evening that is yet to come. So anytime you can take an element from the end of one chapter and bring it to life again in a new way at the beginning of the next chapter, that is a great technique that can really help your story shine. And my number 7 tip is to open with colorful character thoughts. If you have a character in your story who has a humorous tone or a unique voice or anything like that, you might want to start opening some of your chapters with them making fun observations about your story world. For instance, in the book Horns, chapter 25 opens up with the following line. The waitress said Ig would be more interesting if he killed someone, so he decided why not kill Lee Tourneau. And that's a fun, morbid line that puts some energy into the story. Not only does it hint at conflict that is yet to come, but it does it in a humorous way that gives the story some personality. So anytime you have characters who think like that, or characters who have a unique voice or a unique perspective on the world of their story, consider bringing out those thoughts to set us up for more exciting things to come. So I hope this helps. Question of the day: what is your favorite way to open up a chapter? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend if you don't mind. Pick up a copy of Bad Parts if you haven't already. And as always, remember to keep on writing.